And we do really appreciate all of the work that's gone into these subgroups, this process. We believe that the feedback that we've gotten throughout this process has been really valuable in making these programs really robust and making these improvements something that we can really be proud of. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just move on to the next section. If anyone has any questions on the timeline or what we're working through, we'd be glad to take those questions kind of throughout the meeting, but I think that's all relatively familiar information for you all at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation off to Amanda, and she'll talk through some of the process for the Best Management Practices program.
Thanks, Natalie. So I'm going to walk through today the final recommendations from the Agricultural Best Management Practices Advisory Committee. ADWR's intent is to include these recommendations as the proposal for the 5th Management Plan Best Management Practices program. So the BMP was extended by executive order at the end of last year and has had 6 meetings discussing the BMP program for the 5th Management Plan. We were working with a tight timeline, and the committee and the agricultural community came together to have an in-depth discussion about the program, largely centering on the approved list of management practices and the points targets for the program. ADWR would like to thank the hard work of the committee members and also the agricultural community for attending these meetings and providing your thoughtful comments and suggestions throughout the process. We know that it was a tight timeline and there was a lot of time and work that went into developing those comments and suggestions, and staff is grateful for the commitment to the development of the program for the management plan. The committee had 2 main recommendations that I'll briefly walk through today. The first is the updates to the list of approved best management practices. So this is currently Appendix 4B in the 4th Management Plan. And the second is the updates to the points limits in each category. So the BMP committee had several meetings discussing the list of approved practices. I've listed the recommendations here by category and section. So Section 1 are the 4 categories of approved practices. The recommendations consist of a total of 9 new BMPs and 13 changes to existing BMPs. The new BMPs and changes consisted of updates due to new technology, more clearly including maintenance practices, and clarifications to language. Substitute practices are also now included in all 4 categories in Section 1, allowing for practices that aren't on the list but result in similar efficiencies as the approved practices. Substitute practices were previously only included in Category 3 and Category 4. The recommendations also included a procedure for adding a new practice to the approved list, which is Section 2 on this table. Section 2 recognizes the ongoing creativity and innovation in the agricultural sector and a need for a procedure to include them in the approved list of BMPs. The full documentation of the changes is included below the table on that link and is also available on the BMP committee website. The committee also recommended changes to the points levels in each category. There were no changes as compared to the 4MP to the maximum points allowed in each category or to the total points requirement. However, some changes were recommended to the minimum points required. So rather than raising the total number of points from 12, the minimum was increased in 3 of the categories: water conveyance system improvements, irrigation water management, and agronomic management. The minimum points increase reflects a requirement for more diversity in the BMPs implemented and also reflects an increase in conservation for the 5th Management Plan. So that is the summary of the recommendations from the BMP Advisory Committee. ADWR's intent is to incorporate these changes as recommended by the BMP Advisory Committee into the draft regulatory language of the 5th Management Plans, which we will preview in a future subgroup meeting, as Natalie mentioned earlier. So before we do stop for questions, I would like to give the chairman of the BMP Advisory Committee, Scott Riggins, time to comment or expand on anything I just described.
Yes, thank you very much, Amanda. Am I being heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. Always like to make sure before I start to ramble on. Wanted to thank the department for the work that we've been going through in the agricultural community for the last better than half a year of working together and trying to find directions of amenable compromises and to reflect what water conservation enhancements were being attempted through the code, and at the same time recognizing limitations and the abilities of the agricultural community to step up and make changes and greater conservation possible. I think it's been a very good practice that we've all gone through. I think that we have come up with a much better program than actually has been in the initial BMP program, which was the third management plan when it began. Great thanks to the director, Director Bachowski, in looking through and seeing where the BMP committee originally had a place in the code, how it worked, and getting amended to where we have a continuing BMP advisory committee that goes forward to help both the agricultural community and the department in fielding challenges in the future. Other than that, I have spoken ad infinitum in many meetings through all the changes and the ways the BMP different. I don't think it's germane today to go over any of the aspects of the proposals for the new BMP program. They're all listed out to where they can be seen on DWR's webpage. Any questions that come out of that can certainly be fielded. Probably a good place to start would be with the agricultural community itself, either the BMP committee or possibly Farm Bureau or one of the other organizations that works with agriculture, so we can see if there's anything that we need to discuss. But other than that, I think this is a marvelous time for any questions. And the agricultural community, through its discussions, I believe has, through consensus, asked the department to adopt these new practices in its program. So if there's any questions of me, I'd be glad to happy to answer them. Or if the questioner wants to address them to the department. Thank you much.
So for now, we'll go ahead and pause for a moment. If there are any other questions or comments on this update around the Best Management Practices program, we'd love to hear that. Otherwise, we can move on. So we'll pause for a moment here and allow people time to either unmute themselves or to type any questions or comments into the chat box.
Natalie, this is Donovan with the Roosevelt Irrigation District.
Hi, Donovan. Go ahead.
I presented the modifications to the BMP program to our customers. We do have some concerns, and just as a side, we're going to put those together and send something into y'all for a review. How that gets handled, I have yet to work out the details with. I recently spoke with Scott, and so we're working on that, and I just didn't want anybody to be surprised.
Okay, great. Thank you, Donovan. We'll look forward to going through those and having some conversations with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any comments in the chat, so we will go ahead and move on to the next portion of our presentation here today. Amanda?
So we released a proposal for the integrated farm program early last week, and today we'd like to discuss the details of that proposal with you, along with the comments that we have received so far. So the integrated farm program is possible under this statute, which allows for the adoption of an additional alternative conservation program in the Fifth Management Plan, so long as the conservation is at least equivalent to that required in the base program. So this program would be completely voluntary and an alternative to participating in the base BMP or historic cropping programs. So this program would allow multiple IGRs to be combined under one reporting umbrella. So this is similar to how IGRs can report together in the BMP program, but instead of implementing BMPs, the allotments from participating rights under the same owner-operator could be combined. The allotment would have a cut to the aquifer or a % reduction of that total combined allotment. So farms here would have the ease of reporting and being able to use that water anywhere within the combined footprint. And for ADWR, this streamlines reporting and helps us with meeting the department's requirement to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. In the last meeting, we talked through some of the aspects of this program that still need to be developed. So first is the geographic limitation, or how rights can be combined. The second is what the cut to the aquifer percentage might be, and also how individuals can leave and join the program, and also how flex credits might be managed. So we did take that feedback and develop a proposal that we're going to discuss here today. Just quickly before I get to the proposal, I want to show this graphic, which kind of helps to illustrate how the integrated farm program might fit as kind of a middle program between the BMP and base programs in the Fifth Management Plan. So the integrated farm program could address the administrative burden concerns of the base program, but with the simplicity of an allotment-based program without the need to implement and report on individual BMPs. So this visual shows an example comparing the three programs. Under the base program, although these two rights, A and B, have the same owner-operator, they would each have their own allotment and each would be required to report separately. But under the integrated farm program, the owner-operator could combine the allotments of rights A and B and apply that water anywhere on the land of the two rights. But that combined allotment would have a cut to the aquifer, and the two rights would also be able to combine their reporting. Under the BMP program, there is no allotment, and the reporting of rights A and B can be combined so long as the owner-operator implements and reports on the required approved BMPs. So this is a table that summarizes some of the components of the proposal that we released earlier last week. The first component is the geographic limitation. So the proposal is for farms to be able to be combined at the irrigation district level if they are in an irrigation district, or at the subbasin level if they are not in an irrigation district. Next is the cut to the aquifer. Staff has proposed a 7.5% cut to the aquifer, so this would mean that each individual IGR in the program would get an allotment as they would under the base program, but the sum of the allotments would be reduced by 7.5% to the aquifer. The next one is the flex credits. This is a little bit different than the ideas we suggested in the past. We received feedback about reducing the complexity of the program as much as possible, and a suggestion that we thought helped reduce some of that complexity, particularly around flex credits, is to develop a new flex account for the new integrated farm unit. So similar to the BMP program, the existing flex accounts of each of the individual IGRs would be frozen, and a new flex account would be created with debits and credits that are based on the new total allotment for the integrated farm unit. Staff is also proposing that the new flex account be limited to 50%, both positive and negative, of the new combined total allotment. Finally, joining and leaving the program would be similar to how it's done in the BMP program. So an application must be completed, permission must be given from the owner if it's a lessee, and the individual IGRs must be in compliance with their flexibility accounts. An IGR can also leave the program for a couple of reasons, including new ownership. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we did release this proposal for your consideration early last week, and so far this table here summarizes the feedback we have received. For the geographic limitation, the feedback has been that we should do this at the sub-basin level for all farms, regardless of if they are an irrigation district, similar to how flex credits can be transferred. So while we do see the value in doing this, it could be administratively difficult. Flex credit transfers are done outside of the annual reporting process, so it doesn't quite have the same administrative complexity, whereas reporting is something that is often done by districts, and allowing farm combinations in different districts and outside the districts might result in several different reporters for the same farm unit. The department also requires data on the total water use by district, so allowing a single report at the sub-basin level would likely result in the need for a very complex report, which could be an administrative burden for both the farmer and the department. So we do still see the program limited to the irrigation district as an improvement, even though it might result in a couple of reports rather than just a single one. For the cut to the aquifer, we have had several comments that 7.5 is too high and that we should consider a range closer to 3 to 5%, which would better allow a farmer to see the benefit of joining the program. For flex credits, we actually didn't receive any initial feedback about the flex credits proposal. For joining and leaving, we did have some comments that the leaving process is a little bit prohibitive. So in creating this proposal, staff started with an identical leaving process as the BMP program, just for some familiarity. But as this program is a little bit different from the BMP program, the leaving requirements could be adjusted to better fit kind of this allotment-based program. This program isn't practice-based, so there could be some differences on a farm leaving the program, so the farm isn't tied to the program for the entirety of the management period as they would be in the BMP program. So we will continue to take additional feedback on each of these items today through the meeting questionnaire and through our email. And when we come back to the group with proposed legal language, we can continue to discuss how these changes could be written into the fifth management plan. So with that, we can open up to any questions or comments that we have on the integrated farm program.
Amanda, this is Scott Riggins.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, thank you very much. A lot of work has gone into the integrated farm program proposal, and it's appreciated. And I fully recognize there are areas in the Phoenix AMA that this might be a valuable proposal and it could work very well for them. And that indeed is their decision to decide whether or not that they wish to, enter into a proposal of this nature. I can say with not utter assurity, because it's very difficult to be prescient, but I can't imagine that this will be used in the Pinal AMA in any way whatsoever. I don't think it'll address any issues that can't be addressed in better ways. I think that people will find prohibitive aspects of this in the Pinal AMA. And it's fine that we have a program that doesn't get used down here. I don't think that's a problem. We have another conservation program that I don't think anyone ever went into after it was created as well. But I believe that basically the Pinal AMA doesn't have a agreement or disagreement whether this should go forward or not. I think it's fine if it does. But the Phoenix AMA folk, I think they're the ones that need to weigh in and state how they feel this proposal should go forward. And with that, I thank you all very much.
Thanks, Scott. Did anyone else have any questions or comments about the integrated farm program proposal?
This is Ron Rayner.
Hi, Ron.
Hi.
Yep, I can hear you.
You know, one of the things that I believe is a little difference between Phoenix AMA and Pinnell is that there's quite a lot of urbanizing activity going on. And I would just bet that we have a lot more smaller parcel properties that are being leased out. And so, I mean, it's very common to have 40 acre or less units. And so they're just so difficult to manage when you have to deal with a water duty or a IGFR of that size. And by being able to combine some of these, it would make it a lot easier to deal with. And my observation is that I think that the 7.5% cut to the aquifer is really way too high, and even a 3% would be an interesting level because it actually is a positive reduction from the current water duties, and there's virtually no other program that we implement that has such a requirement, and that it gives an immediate reduction in the water duties that you can utilize. So because it's not required of the BMP, as a matter of fact, the BMP could even increase, and we saw that happen in a number of the Pinell County water duties, as a matter of fact, I mean, in their total water use. So, you know, I think that to have a positive reduction or a fixed reduction of 3% would be, you know, absolutely the maximum that ought to be requested for that, because it would be something that would be fixed. And I do concern a little bit about the exiting process, because it should be easy enough that it wouldn't be prohibitive from a landlord standpoint, that, you know, these guys don't even care if the land's farmed most of the time anyway, but they don't want to do anything that would make it more difficult when they sell a property to get out of the lease, basically, and to get it out from under that process. And I certainly support the, if we can figure out a way to make it, the reporting reasonably, well, technically possible, I guess, that it should be on a sub basin aspect to be able to report. Because we have several areas, especially out here on the west side, where you have districts, but you also have pump farms in between them. And it would just make it quite a mess if you couldn't combine all of those. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thanks, Ron. Did we have anyone else with any questions or comments? I'm not seeing anything in the chat today.
Ron's comment.
Yep. We're seeing a comment from Kevin Rogers in the chat directed toward Ron. Kevin says, Ron, do you see a benefit to moving this forward then?
Yes, I think that it certainly can be moved forward, but I think we need to settle on some of these aspects like that reduction. So the cut to the aquifer, if it was set at 3%, and the exiting process was a little more defined, and I think, and if it were in the subbasin aspect, if those features could be implemented, I think it would be fine to go forward with it.
Great, thank you, Ron. So our intent here is to consider the feedback that we got through the questionnaire, and I do want to thank those of you who submitted comments through that. That was really helpful for us to be able to see some of that ahead of time and consider these things. We'll be taking those comments and what we've heard here today, and when we schedule our next meeting to review the regulatory language, we'll come back and discuss this a little bit more and kind of consider how we might adjust different pieces or whether there might be different pieces of this that we can adjust or change strategies on a little bit to address some of the issues that you all have brought forward. The geographic limitation piece, I at least certainly am interested in hearing ideas on. I do think that that could be something that could become really complicated, and that's something we're trying to avoid there. So we'll definitely have to do some additional consideration of that piece, and the exiting process, kind of the same thing. I think we have some flexibility on the exiting process that we can certainly incorporate into that next, a discussion of that into the next meeting. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is actually closing. So this is a quick meeting, and we really appreciate all of you attending.
Before we close, mute, and I want to say something.
Okay.
Mute. Do you want to propose that here?
I can do that. Sorry about that. We were just having a quick side conversation here. So what we were discussing here quickly was just having a few side conversations about the integrated farm program ahead of that next public meeting. If any of you are interested in participating in some of those additional discussions, I would certainly that would certainly be helpful to have additional people taking part in that. Ron, for you specifically, I know you and I have had a number of conversations now about the integrated farm program, so I'll reach out to you to get some additional feedback and get some additional thoughts on the path forward there. But we can certainly, it may be helpful to have some group conversations to that effect as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. So with that, I really just want to thank this entire group for the productive conversations we've been able to have throughout this process, for all the ground that we have covered here. These FIF management plans have been an interesting process, and I certainly have learned a lot. So I really appreciate the time that you all have taken to work with us to develop these FIF management plans. I look forward to kind of reviewing our product with all of you, that draft regulatory language, and then early next year, the actual drafts of the full fifth management plans. We're really excited about a lot of the improvements that we're making, both in the programs and for kind of the structure of the management plans as a whole. So we're really looking forward to getting to share all of that with you. I will pause one last time if there's any other questions or comments. I'm not seeing anything. Just one quick reminder that we do have that questionnaire. If there's any other feedback that you all think of, we will have that questionnaire open for 2 weeks to allow you a little bit more time to consider any questions or comments on either of these programs that you might want to share with us. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and pause there for a moment before we close down, but we really appreciate all of your time.